Hi, this is Colin Sandberg with Backbone Performance, and I'm obviously in the car right now, driving down to Georgia to the Tour of Southern Highlands, and since I'm in the car by myself for so long, figured to keep myself occupied and knock out a couple videos. One thing I want to talk about here is weight loss. This is something that just comes up all the time for athletes, and it crossed my mind as I'm heading down to this race, because I looked and I myself am about 12 pounds heavier right now than I was this time last year. Last year I did pretty well, at least in the Masters race. I was one of the strongest guys. This year I'm going in about as strong, but a little bit heavier. And of course it's a hilly race, so it's something, I will admit I think about. I probably obsess about too much, like a lot of people. But, from time to time I try to look at things objectively. And I've been told, too, that it helps to tell some of these personal stories. Let you guys know that I know where you're coming from. So let me also give a disclaimer before I really start that I try to look at a lot of these issues without the emotional side, without the psychological side. This is an issue that's tough to separate those things, and I think I've tried to separate that maybe a bit too much in the past when I've written about this issue, when I've talked to people. So I'm gonna try to address that in the best way I can. So what's the benefit of losing weight, or what are some of the benefits? Of course, if you lose weight and you're just as powerful, you're putting out the same amount of power, less weight, you're going to go faster. It is as simple as that. Now, where it gets complicated is you go more faster in certain situations. Obviously, uphill, gravity is more of a limiter, so the less gravity affects you, the faster you're going to go, versus riding down a flat road. You say, okay, I'm putting out 300 watts. What if I was 1 pound lighter? How much faster would I go? You would go faster, but it's microscopic, the amount. And as you go uphill, and as that grade starts to get steeper and steeper, basically the biggest difference you're going to have. So here I would mention that in the US, and especially here on the East Coast, there are so few races that really have these big, long, steep climbs that it really is worth thinking about before you start obsessing about this stuff too much. And last group presentation I gave, I said that there were about 30 people in the room, and I said, raise your hand if you would like to be at least 2 pounds lighter. And I'd say 75% of the room raised their hand. And I said, okay, now raise your hand if you can think of a race you did last year that you know you would have done better at if you had been at least 2 pounds lighter. And maybe 3 guys raised their hand. So that shows you right there that for as much as we obsess about this stuff, it doesn't always affect us as much as we might think. The hilliest race I did last year, Green Mountain Stage Race, which ends at the top of Appalachian Gap, really long, steep climb. Even that race, I know, even though I was probably about 5 pounds heavier than I wanted to be, didn't really affect me. And one of the reasons was it was pouring rain, cold, and stormy that day, and all of the tiny little climber guys got dropped at the base of the climb because they didn't eat enough, and maybe they were a bit hypothermic. So would that have been the same if the weather had been nice? Who's to say? It's just my point is that we obsess about this a lot. myself included, and it's not always completely justified. So, but bottom line is, if you lose weight and your power stays the same, you will go faster. Maybe not much, but depending on the situation, but you will go faster. A couple of the other things, though, that people don't think about quite so much are, one, even when you're not going uphill, the more you weigh, the more energy it takes to accelerate you from, whatever speed up to whatever speed. So you will notice a difference even on flat ground, and for most of us racing on the East Coast, this is probably even more noticeable, that we're accelerating out of a turn. Or notice this a lot with cyclocross and mountain biking, where you have all these quick accelerations. You will definitely notice the even losing 5 pounds or something. I would say when I'm at my lightest, where I notice that most is mountain biking, and it's just these quick accelerations over rocks, over logs, out of turns, and up these like quick hills. I just notice everything flows a lot better when I'm lighter, when I'm at my race weight, so to speak. Now, the other thing is aerodynamics. If you lose, now this won't be a major factor if we're talking about 1 or 2 pounds, but if we're talking about 20 pounds, if you lose 20 pounds, and let's say, again, same example I was talking about before, you're riding down a flat road, putting out 300 watts, and then I say, okay, what if I lost 20 pounds? Well, theoretically, it wouldn't go a whole lot faster, even with 20 pounds at least on a flat road, but 20 pounds means I'm thinner. Being thinner means I'm more aerodynamic. That aerodynamic advantage is definitely worth more than the gravity aspect of it, the less mass there. So that's an issue. The other thing, kind of along those same lines, is, again, if we're talking about 20 pounds, we're talking about a significant amount of weight. Bike fit can change. Seeing this, I used to do a lot of bike fits. I've probably done 1,000 bike fits in my career, close to it. And you see guys come in, start riding, they've got a beer gut that's in the way, they're pedaling like this, their knees are out. Then they come back 6 months later, they've lost 20 pounds. We can raise the saddle, sometimes dramatically. Sometimes we're talking about over an inch, being able to raise that saddle. Their pedaling is more efficient. They have fewer knee problems. They can get closer to the bars. They can adopt a more aggressive position. It really often does seem to be that everything falls in line a bit better. Finally, all of that extra weight, if we're talking about
watch out,
fat,
vehicle stopped on shoulder ahead.
Sorry for the GPS interruptions here. All of that extra fat, it's extra insulation. It is going to make your temperature regulation more difficult, and from a practical standpoint, you spend a lot of energy just keeping yourself cool because you've got this big layer on. I mean, imagine if you were wearing a lot of extra clothing, you're overheating, you have to work harder because you're overheating, you have to work harder to cool yourself down. That means you burn more calories. That means you actually, ironically, have to eat more on the bike, but it also means you're not as efficient, your heart rate's probably elevated, and at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to go as fast for as long. So those are the advantages in a nutshell, and the bottom line is, a lot of times people do make too much out of the advantages, and don't think enough about the potential drawbacks, given the advantages, especially if we're talking about 1, 2, or even 5 pounds, are usually pretty minimal. So I think there does need to be a distinction made.
Police reported ahead.
Needing to lose a few pounds, 5 pounds versus we're talking about 20 pounds. Yeah, it's probably a significant goal. If you're 20 pounds overweight, it's going to be, you're going to have some limitations with what you can do with just training alone. So let's talk about some of the potential drawbacks. The biggest one is that if you are cutting out fuel, you're taking in less fuel, less food, you're risking not giving yourself the energy you need to do your workouts or to do them properly. So you're either doing your workouts kind of half-assed, or in a lot of cases missing them, especially if you're really tired. And that quickly becomes not worth it. If we think about the caloric balance issues, if you're missing workouts because you're so tired because you're not eating enough, then you're missing out on that whole, in addition to the benefit from training, you're also missing out on burning those calories then. And that can spiral, especially if you end up getting sick, getting a cold, which you're going to be at much more risk for. You're not recovering as well from your workouts if you're not eating enough. So anytime you're really thinking about weight loss so much and decreasing your intake, you got to be very, very, very careful. And if you're losing the value of the workouts, or you're missing workouts because of it, it's not worth it. That's really what it comes down to. Now, there's also some more psychological issues here. If you're focusing too much on weight loss, maybe you're at risk for developing an eating disorder, or at least disordered eating habits, and maybe not feeling good about yourself because of body image issues or because of this obsession with weight loss. So it's also something we all need to be cognizant of and thoughtful of. So what is the best way to lose weight, or what are some ideas for losing weight? Now, this is of course a question I get all the time. The biggest thing you can do is train consistently. I am not in favor of modifying training to, in most situations, modifying training to allow for weight loss goals. I'd rather say let's optimize your training, and then if weight loss is a goal, think about the intake side, because it is a balance. Weight loss, weight gain, weight maintenance, it is a balance. I know that this can get tricky. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but really it does ultimately come down to, if you burn more calories than you take in, you lose weight. If you take in more calories than you burn, you gain weight. And if you take in about the same number of calories as you burn, you stay the same weight. So you can change that equation either by burning more calories, or if you're trying to lose weight, burn more calories and take in the same, or take in fewer calories and burn more. So that in general, that latter example, I'm not usually in favor of, because I think if you're adding training just for the sake of weight loss and it's not optimal for your training, it's going to catch up to you. So that said, the best thing you can do is train consistently and don't have any big gaps, and that means having a training plan that's reasonable, that's realistic for you, for your schedule.
Police reported ahead.
Also, just staying healthy, minding yourself, going to the doctor when you need to, taking a day off when you need to, or taking an easy day if you don't feel right. And in terms of potential injuries, paying attention to your body, if your knee's hurting, if your back's hurting, taking care of those things, because if you don't pay attention to them, then they're going to lay you out. And if you miss a couple weeks of training or more, 3, 4, whatever weeks of training, that is, like I said before, in addition to the loss of those workouts from a training perspective, you've missed out on a lot of calories didn't get burned. So train consistently, stay healthy. In terms of the intake side, eating, I think the main thing is try to eat healthy. It's the same recommendations that I would have for weight loss as I would for anybody.
Watch out, vehicle stopped on shoulder ahead.
Eat a lot of vegetables. Almost all of us could stand to eat more vegetables. Eat vegetables of different colors, red, yellow, green, orange, all those different colors. And make as much of your own food as possible. The fewer times we eat out or eat processed food, the better. The more your own food you can make, the better. Even if it's not the healthiest food in the world, better
Watch
to
out,
make it
vehicle
yourself.
stopped on shoulder ahead.
So eat healthy, train consistently, pay attention to your body, stay healthy. One thing about the vegetables that I will go back to is one of the side benefits of eating a lot of vegetables is they have a lot of fiber in them, and that fills you up. So you can eat, actually, if you change your diet to incorporate more fiber, more vegetables, you can eat just as much bulk and actually be taking in fewer calories. So you still feel pretty full. Now, there are certain things that I think you want to be careful about limiting. I'm not generally in favor of, I don't often tell people completely cut this out, completely cut something out. I think most foods you can get away with eating, at least in moderation, and usually the problem is not that you're eating it, period. The problem becomes when you have it in excess, and that will happen with just about anything. I mean, if you eat nothing but carrots, you're going to have problems too. An excess of beta carotene, face and skin will turn orange. So you can get away with eating most things in moderation. There are some things in particular, though, that you want to limit, and I would say that your typical American doesn't do a great job of limiting. Processed foods would be number one. Anything with that's processed a lot of times has a lot of hidden sugar, salt, and fat in it. And not that sugar, salt, and fat are bad, but I think if you're going to have them, enjoy them. Use some salt to make your food more flavorful, or use some fat to make it more flavorful, taste better. Enjoy some sugar as a treat in desserts or whatever. But with a lot of processed foods, that stuff's just hidden in the food. You don't even know you're eating it, and there's all sorts of reasons why I'm not going to get into. But make your own food as much as possible is the idea, and that way you can control the ingredients. So dairy is another one. Again, I don't think for most people there's anything wrong with having some milk, some foods that have some cream in it, some butter, some cheese. It's not going to kill you for most people. Now, when we're talking about people who are lactose intolerant, it's another story. But the average person's not going to kill you. But when you overdo it, when you're having a glass of milk with every meal, 3 scoops ice cream for dessert, you're having cheese melted all over everything. It's a lot, and for a lot of people, dairy can cause problems, can cause GI problems. There are some theories going around about sort of lactose intolerance being more of a spectrum. The premise being that we're all somewhere on that spectrum. No one really, humans are the only species that has milk and dairy products after infancy. So it's not meant for adults. It's meant for infants. And on top of that, we're having mostly cow's milk, so from another species. So, do I think it's going to kill you? No. Do I think it could cause some problems? Yeah, and it does. So, it's just something I think you want to not overdo it. Be careful of. Sugars, high fructose corn syrup, alcohol, all of these things, I think, yeah, most people, they're fine in moderation. The problem becomes overdoing it. So, one other thing that would be slightly less traditional that I do recommend sometimes for those trying to lose weight, and this is, I'd say, among the more controversial things that I would say, so take it with a grain of salt or a warning label, but you might consider missing meals once in a while, provided you're thoughtful about how you do that. And just as an example, I would say I will a lot of times try to miss dinner once a week, or have just, maybe I'll have a light snack or a late lunch or something, but miss dinner, and I make sure to time that so it's at a time when I don't have I'm not doing a century the next day, I'm not doing a race the next day. It's like I don't need my glycogen stores to be topped off for early the next morning. So it would either be the night before a day off or a recovery ride, or a day when I'm training late in the day, so I've got the whole course of the day to top those glycogen stores off and make sure I can really give it my best shot for that workout in the evening. Now, when I do that, I will part of that is you go to bed a little hungry. Hopefully you're not going to bed feeling like you're starving and your stomach's growling. That's going to cut into the quality of the sleep. But the truth is, it's not going to kill you to go to bed a little bit hungry.
Police reported ahead.
And that's another psychological barrier that I think we need to get over. But just the act of telling yourself, it's okay to go to bed a little hungry, I'm not going to die. If you think about the course of human existence on this planet, most of the time our species has been around, we haven't had the ability to have 3 meals at regular times every day. Now we do, and we start getting into this, we have these psychological hang-ups about missing a meal, or I guess a better way to put it is we have a psychological hang-up about the act of feeling hungry, as if and that's totally understandable. I mean, that is, from an evolutionary standpoint, that is what drives us to go off and hunt or pick berries or grow things, get food, to have that energy so we can have that sustenance. But in the modern day, we don't have the same need, or most of us don't have the same need to panic if we're a little bit hungry. And just the act of thinking about that can help you override that feeling. And I can tell you, in a way, it feels kind of liberating to go to bed a little bit hungry. Say to yourself, yeah, I'm gonna be fine. I'll have breakfast in the morning. I'll have lunch the next day. So that can help, but you need to be smart about how you do it. Okay, so what is next on my list here? I'm gonna check my notes real quick. Okay, so monitoring. I would say one big recommendation that I have, even for those of you who are not trying to lose weight, whether you're trying to lose, gain, or stay the same, or change your body composition, is I think it's really valuable to monitor yourself. I would suggest buying a body fat monitor scale. So this would be something that measures bioelectrical impedance. It looks just like a scale, but you step on it with your bare feet. It runs a really, really low voltage current through your legs and comes up with an estimate of body fat. And then sometimes there's other estimates that it'll read, like muscle mass, body water, bone mass. Now, take the actual numbers on those with a big grain of salt, because it is not the most accurate way to measure all of that stuff. So if it tells you you are 10% body fat, doesn't mean you're 10% body fat. Depending on the settings, you could be 15 and you could be 5 and anywhere in between. But hopefully using one of those scales is relatively consistent. So what we're looking for in monitoring both weight and body fat percentage is looking for the trend. It's not so much the number itself, at least with the body fat, it's the trend. You want to know if it's going up, going down, or staying the same. So what you notice with those things, and especially looking at them together, is that you notice these movements in one direction or another. Now, I will say, let me back up 1 second and say that just on a day-to-day basis can be really valuable to take your weight, and if you lose 3 pounds in one day, chances are that's mostly water, that's dehydration. So that's a good, hopefully if you have lost 3 pounds of water weight in one day, hopefully you know that you're a bit dehydrated, but it can put a number to that. So roughly speaking, 1 pound is equal to, you want to take in 24 ounces of water or fluid for every pound lost. And that can easily happen. I mean, hot summer day, you go out and ride for a couple hours, 90-degree weather, you can lose 4 or 5 pounds. So that would mean, if you lose 4 pounds, let's say, that would mean 4 times 24, what's that, 96 ounces of fluid that you want to be taking in, not all at once, but throughout the day to get rehydrated. If you're sick, if you had like stomach bug and you were throwing up and you knew you lost a bunch of weight, having that number there can be really helpful, just so you know, okay, I need to keep hydrating, keep working on that, keep drinking water, keep drinking Pedialyte or whatever until I get back up to really close to what my normal weight is. Now, in terms of more long-term, and by long-term I mean 7-day rolling average, looking at those trends, so like week to week or even month to month trends. You can look for movements in different directions. So you might be, and the way I look at this is you can actually look at movements of gaining weight, and that could be, so if you show that your trend is that your weight is going up, well, that could be that your muscle mass is going up, and it could be that your body fat percentage is going up. Now, hopefully, water and bone aren't really, I mean, water will change a lot from a day-to-day basis, but hopefully, not really in the long term unless you're chronically dehydrated or progressively dehydrated. And bone mass hopefully is not really changing a whole lot on a day-to-day basis. That would be pretty concerning if it is. So really we're talking about fat and muscle mass. If you see that you're gaining weight, it might be that you're gaining muscle mass, it might be that you're gaining body fat, it might be both. And same thing with losing weight. And same thing with, staying the same. You could be staying the same weight, but you might be, your muscle mass might be going down and your body fat might be going up. For most people that just stop training, either because they're taking a break and it's the end of the season, or they're injured and they have to take some time off, they will not notice weight gain at first, because that's exactly what happens. They lose muscle mass, but they gain body fat. So you don't start noticing your actual total body weight going up until a lot of times, 3 or 4 weeks later. But if you were using a body fat monitor scale every day, you might see those changes. You might see those that progression. But you want to know what's going on. You want to know what those readings are, and the advantage to doing it every day is that those day-to-day fluctuations kind of get averaged out. If you're looking more at a 7-day rolling average and those trends from week to week, as opposed to from day to day, where it can be all over the place. So, highly recommended. You can buy a body fat monitor scale, bioelectrical impedance scale, I think for about $40 or $50. In my mind, well worth it. A lot of them now are Bluetooth compatible, so they'll connect to your phones and you can just use, I know mine, I open up the app on my phone, I step on it and it automatically goes to the phone, so I don't need to write it down or anything. I just have it there on my phone with those numbers. So yeah, that is the monitoring aspect of it. Last thing I wanted to talk about is just touch on the psychological aspect of it a little bit, and this is kind of related to what I was talking about before about the monitoring. It can be a psychological hang-up for a lot of people just to get on the scale. Sometimes it's sort of, and I get this. In truth, I had about 6 months at the end of last year, beginning of this year, I couldn't even get on the scale, and it was a stupid psychological hang-up. But I knew that I was a lot heavier than I wanted to be. It doesn't change, not weighing yourself, not looking at what those numbers are, don't change them. They are what they are, so trying to look at things objectively from a more scientific perspective, better to have the numbers. At the same time, you do it, like I said at the beginning, you have to recognize there is a psychological aspect here, and a psychological hang-up for a lot of people. If it causes you a lot of stress to get on the scale, to see those numbers, if it gets you down, if it makes you less motivated to go out there and do your training and to eat healthy and limit your portion size, those sort of things, if you're seeing those numbers and just being too depressed to train or too depressed to eat right, it isn't of much benefit. So it's not worth it. But if you can get over that, if you can get past that hang-up, I think having that data is good. Doesn't mean you have to do anything with it, but having the data is good, and it helps answer questions when they come up. Why am I not feeling good? Why am I feeling better? Why do I feel stronger? Having that data helps. The other thing I wanted to talk about with, as far as psychological stuff here, is body image is an issue. Unfortunately, very large percentage of cyclists suffer from eating disorders, men and women, more women than men, but certainly a much higher percentage in either case than the general population. So why is that? Why is that in a sport like cycling, that I feel like is pretty open and accessible to people of all shapes and sizes, and you have successful cyclists of all shapes and sizes, from very, very small, very, very thin, to very, very big, and with fairly high percentages of body fat, being really successful cyclists at the top levels of the sport. So why is it that so many of us have these issues? We have these body image issues, body dysmorphia, disordered eating, and eating disorders.
Watch out, object on road ahead.
So, and I don't pretend to have all the answers to that, but one of the things that I think is related is that the parts of the sport that get the most publicity is the Tour de France, okay? And you see these guys that are really, really skinny. Chris Froome being a great example. He is the face of cycling to so many people that really don't know much about the sport. They're looking at Chris Froome, and not only him, but a lot of the top contenders in the Tour de France. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the people that get hung up on this notion that is what you're supposed to look like if you're going to be successful as a cyclist. And I see this honestly with some of the juniors that I work with. Even though on one hand they know better, they look up to these guys, and they see how incredibly skinny they are, and think, okay, that's part of being successful at this sport. What they don't realize is that the Tour de France is something, European racing in general, very, very different from American racing. Races are longer and harder, but stage racing in particular, and then when you're talking about 3-week Grand Tours, it's a whole nother ball game. And that is a case where, if you're going to be successful in these 3-week Grand Tours at the top level of the sport, yeah, it is worth what they're looking at, every detail, and one of those details is making sure their body fat is at the absolute minimum that it can be, that they can still put out the power they need to. But there's a lot that they risk in that, and mostly they put themselves at risk for getting sick. And the other aspect of that is that with the amount that you need to train for an event like that, a lot of these guys regularly doing training weeks over 30 hours, that's a lot of calories that you are burning, and it's a lot of fatigue. So, meaning that you're going to get home hard to eat, make your meals and everything, and train that much. And so, I guess, bottom line, what I'm saying is it's more effect of their success, or it's being that thin is an effect of the training that they're doing, rather than a cause of their success. But I think that if you look at guys and girls that are successful in, really almost any American race. Even the big one, even when we're talking about Tour of California, Tour of Utah, Tour of Colorado, these races, like, there's bigger guys that are successful, bigger riders that are successful, but especially in the smaller races, especially in, how many crits do we do? There are some really big, successful crit racers. And then even in Europe, and the one-day classics, a lot of this, it's bigger riders. I'm not even gonna mention track and cyclocross and a lot of this. But bottom line, don't make too much out of it. It's more than anything, think about what you need to do to train consistently, to stay healthy, and then to eat healthy, to put good quality food into your body, and monitor yourself. Get on the body fat monitor scale every day. Don't obsess about it, but look at that data, look at what it's doing over times, and use it to make small, manageable changes to your training and your nutrition. So I think that's about enough for now. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you have any other topics you want me to talk about. I'm still going to be on the road for a long time, so got plenty of time for more of this. Take care, and I'll see you soon.